So this is a very short video about why we try to avoid three-dimensional graphs. The main reason, beyond the Necker illusion that we talked about earlier, is that 3D graphs always create lie factor. And we can see this very closely and very clearly in this graph here, where this blue bar has a much wider base than this blue bar. And this blue bar is actually showing significantly more of 2 dimensions of that bar than is this one. And by doing that, we're representing the same data dimension with different scales of pixels. And so when we create 3 dimensions, we create lie factor because we're using different numbers of pixels for the same value. So 20 in this bar is using a different number of pixels than 20 in this bar or 20 in this bar, etc. They all have different numbers of pixels for representing the same level. That doesn't even talk about this problem of occlusion, where this green bar in the left column is this one here, is only showing a tiny little bit of data. A tiny little bit of ink for the amount of data that it is. So we want to avoid using three-dimensional graphs because of the lie factor. Now, I will admit that when I was out in the real world, I was doing this kind of graph too, right? And I was the king of making a 3D column chart with the minimum amount of occlusion and things like that. But at this point, that's not something I would recommend. Now, it's even worse with an example like this, where there's a 3D pie chart that's tipped way back, so the front uses a lot more pixels than the back does. And in this case, this Verna pie piece has been exploded toward us to even more greatly impact our perception of how big that Verna slice is. And most people, when they look at this, would say, well, Verna is probably about 35-40% of the market. Well, let's take a look at that with a little graphic that kind of shows what's happening here with this example. So here we look at this graph where Verna is exploded toward us, and it looks like it's so big, but as we rotate this graph around, it actually looks like now it's smaller than some of these other points are, right? And so we see here that simply by rotating the three-dimensional object, we can totally create lie factor either for or against what we want to. And so this is the point in the class where normally someone who's a marketing person says, well, these people did their job. They showed that their sales were higher than others. And it's true, their sales are actually the highest. But we have to just be aware that this is not accurately reflecting what the data is saying. We can admit that, and we can decide as marketing people or as business people that that's okay based upon our intentions, but we have to look at the ethics of that. And we have to just know that when we make a decision like that, we are playing with people's perceptions. So in general, just avoid 3 dimensions because they always create lie factor.